The horse trainer my dad hired said I broke her brand new saddle. She claimed my mom made me do it. To punish Mom, Dad tied her to a horse and played a game he called the Sled. I couldn't stop the galloping stallion. I could only stand there and cry. Mom became the Sled. She eventually fell asleep in the stable, and no matter how much I called her, she wouldn't wake up. I was so scared. I kept calling my dad's phone like crazy. Daddy, Mommy's asleep. I can't wake her up. Gabbie will never go near the stables again. Please just wake her up. On the other end of the line, I heard Dad swear impatiently. She's just sleeping, she's not dead. If you can't wake her, then let her stay asleep. A few days later, Dad came back with the trainer. Tell your mother to come out and apologize and I'll forgive her. I looked up at him. Mommy turned into a sled. She's all dried up now. Our neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, was grooming her horse in her stable when she suddenly covered her nose and frowned. At that moment, I was clutching some leftover horse pellets, stuffing them into my mouth. She looked around and finally saw me. Gabbie, what is your family feeding that horse? Why does the manure smell so awful? I reached out my hand and showed her the pellets. This tastes good. It doesn't smell bad. Mrs. Higgins immediately climbed over the fence and slapped the feed out of my hand. You can't eat this stuff, honey. Where are your parents? Why are you out here all by yourself? I brushed the dust off my clothes. Daddy went riding with the trainer. Mommy turned into a sled and fell asleep. Mrs. Higgins found the sled tucked away in the corner of the stable. When she saw what was inside, she nearly fainted from the shock. Margot? How could she be in here? This is monstrous. Who would shove Margot into a sled like this? Mom's skin felt cold and hard. I called her name, but she still wouldn't wake up. How many days has she been dead? She's completely bled out. Poor Gabbie, she actually thinks her mom is just sleeping. I didn't understand. Wasn't Mom just sleeping? Mrs. Higgins made a call, and soon a group of officers in black uniforms arrived. They took Mom away. That was when I finally understood what Mrs. Higgins meant by dead. It meant sleeping forever, never to wake up again. I chased after the police car for a long time until I tripped and fell. The gravel scraped my arm, and the pain was sharp and stinging. Mrs. Higgins caught up and pulled me into her arms. I screamed and cried. I don't have a mommy anymore. Gabbie doesn't have a mommy. On the giant screen downtown, news was playing about the successful opening of the Lexington Horse Derby. Dad was cutting the ribbon at the opening ceremony. The trainer was smiling, her arm linked tightly with his. People on the street were whispering. What a tragedy. She was only 30. That poor 5-year-old lost her mother. And where is the father? He hasn't even shown up yet. Yeah, but look at that other woman. So young and successful. Her billionaire husband even takes her to his ribbon-cutting events. Talk about different fates. Mrs. Higgins took me home and brought me some real food. Stop eating that horse feed. Eat this for now. If you're ever hungry, just come find me. We can't count on your father, but I can at least make sure you have a meal. I took a bite of the bread, staring at our empty house. I couldn't swallow through the tears. I finally realized I didn't have a mom anymore. It hurt so much. I used my little smartwatch to call Dad. The cartoon ringtone played for a long time, but he didn't answer. Mom had set that ringtone for me. Hearing it felt like she was right there, whispering in my ear. I wanted to hear it again, so I kept calling. After the 5th time, the call finally went through. An angry voice exploded from the speaker. Margot Sterling. If you still can't control your daughter, then both of you can get the hell out of this house. Margot was my mom's name. She told me she was named that because she was the pearl of her mother's eye. She named me Gabbie because I was her and Dad's precious treasure. Dad still didn't know Mom was dead. Daddy, they say Mommy is dead. The men in black uniforms took her away. Dad sounded even more furious. Margot, what kind of sick scheme is this now? Do you have any idea how much this will ruin our daughter? I didn't even tie those knots tight. Besides, the horse was tied to the hitching post. You're really using these low-life tricks just to lure me home. You're actually teaching our daughter to lie and say you're dead? Do you really want to die that badly? How many times do I have to tell you? I've always loved you. Only you. I'm only with her so she can give me a son. Once the boy is born, I'll be back. Don't you get it? Just wait. I'll still spend our anniversary with you this year. Can't you wait just a little longer? Dad finished his rant and hung up. I didn't get a chance to tell him that after he left, the trainer had retied the knots and unhitched the rope. Mom was really gone. I couldn't stand being alone in this big house without Mom anymore. I called my grandmother and asked her to come pick me up. When she arrived and found out what happened, she broke down, screaming and cursing my father. Leo Sterling, you absolute monster. How could you conspire with a stranger to harm my daughter and granddaughter? You're going to rot in hell for this. Grams pulled me into her arms and rubbed my back. Don't be scared, Gabbie. Grandma is here. We aren't leaving until we get justice for your mother. I will make sure that animal goes to prison for what he's done. I huddled in her lap, crying. Daddy doesn't want me anymore. He has a new lady and a new baby. Grams cried and cursed so hard she could barely catch her breath. The officers who took Mom away eventually came back. They gave Grams a small box and told her they had brought Mom home. Grams collapsed on the floor, clutching the box and sobbing uncontrollably. I let out a gut-wrenching scream. I want Mommy. I want Mommy. Grams handed me the small box and told me to hold it tight. She said Mom was inside. I hugged the box to my chest. I pressed my face against it, but it was so cold. I didn't understand how Mom had become so small. How could she fit inside such a tiny, icy box? I whispered to Grams. I don't want Daddy anymore. Let's take Mommy back to your house. Grams said Mom passed away here, so we had to hold the service here. She said it was the only way Mom could find peace and sleep soundly. Otherwise, she would have nightmares forever. Mrs. Higgins came over to help. She and Grams hung white banners and decorated a memorial for Mom. Mom was smiling in the black and white photo. Grams had found it in her old photo album. It was a picture of Mom before she got married. I looked at the photo. Mom was so beautiful and young. She was much prettier than that horse trainer woman. But Dad still chose to leave with that woman. For several days, Dad never showed up. He wouldn't answer his phone. Grams kept pestering his assistant for his location. The assistant finally stammered out the truth. Mr. Sterling and Ms. Miller are on their honeymoon in the Maldives. Please don't tell him I told you. Mr. Sterling gave strict orders not to let anyone know. That soulless, godless animal. My daughter's body isn't even cold, and he's on a honeymoon with his mistress. He's an ungrateful, cold-hearted piece of trash. Grams was so angry she was shaking. Her eyes were dry from crying, but the curses kept coming. I sat nearby in a daze, staring at the little box that held Mom. I found my favorite crystal case and used markers to draw colorful patterns all over it. Then I placed Mom's box inside. Now Mom would be able to sleep even better. Grams pulled me into a hug, her face full of guilt. I should have never agreed to this marriage. Your mother was so in love with him, and that animal even knelt at our door to propose. He knelt there for 3 days until your grandfather and I were moved. He was your grandfather's protege. Your grandpa said he could die in peace knowing the company was in his hands. He swore he'd only ever love your mother. God, how could I have believed his lies? I was so blind. Grams' tears soaked my arm. I hugged her back. It's not your fault, Grams. Grams grabbed my hands when she heard that. When your mom was young, she had the chance to go to grad school abroad. But she gave up her studies just to marry your father. She never imagined it would end like this. Gabbie promised me, when you grow up, no matter what, never give up on your education or your future for a man. Do you understand? I didn't really understand what education or a future meant, but I nodded anyway. Grams, when are we leaving? Grams said, once the 7 days of mourning are over, I'm taking you away. On the 7th day, Grams went to the police station with some security footage. She wasn't home. That was when Dad returned, accompanied by the pregnant trainer. The two of them were kissing the moment they stepped through the door. But when they saw the funeral decorations in the living room, they stopped. Tamsin let out a scream and hid in Dad's arms. Dad looked at Mom's photo, his face turning pale and then red with rage. Margot Sterling, get out here right now. Have you lost your mind just because you're jealous? Why the hell did you turn the house into this? You're making our child play along with a fake funeral. Haven't you had enough? Tamsin stared at the photo, her brow furrowing. Margot knows she's lost her looks, so she had to use an old photo. Dad suddenly grabbed the framed photo of Mom and smashed it onto the floor. You think you can just glare at me? I'll smash this piece of trash. Dad looked terrifying. I was shaking all over. I said in a small, trembling voice, Daddy, Mommy is dead. She's sleeping in that little box. She can't come out anymore. Slap. Dad gave me a stinging blow to the face. I fell to the floor. Margot, get the hell out here. Look at what you've taught our daughter. She's full of lies and manipulation, just like you. If you don't show yourself right now, pack your bags and get out of this house. The villa was eerily quiet. The only sound was the distant neighing of the chestnut stallion in the stables. Dad turned around and saw the saddle in the corner. It was the same saddle from before. I hadn't even touched it, but Tamsin had insisted I broke it. That was why Dad got so angry at Mom and made her play the sled game. Tamsin spoke up. It's all that woman's fault. If she hadn't put the kid up to it, my brand new saddle wouldn't be ruined. Dad picked up the saddle and started hitting me with it. The heavy leather kept slamming into me, tearing my skin. Daddy, it hurts. Daddy, I didn't break the saddle. Daddy, Mommy, she's really dead. Seeing me cowering only made Dad angrier. You still have the nerve to lie. You're teaming up with your mother to trick me, even faking a death. If I don't give you a proper beating today, my name isn't Sterling. Wham. The saddle hit me so hard it actually split in two. Tamsin frowned. I can't believe the quality of these imported saddles is so poor. What a waste of money. Dad roared, Margot, are you still not coming out? You used to be so protective of her. Are you really going to let her take a beating just for your little act? I whispered weakly, Daddy, Mommy, she's really dead. That trainer lady killed her. Dad froze for a second, then picked up half of the broken saddle and kept hitting me. Still lying. And now you're dragging Tamsin into this? Did your mother teach you to say that? I told you I'd be back for our anniversary. Are you really that insecure? Your health is too poor for another round of IVF. I just wanted a son, and I did it all for your sake. How can you be so selfish? Clatter. The broken piece of the saddle flew out of Dad's hand and smashed into my pink crystal case. Mommy. I crawled toward it. The crystal case was sturdy and hadn't shattered yet. Daddy, please don't hurt Mommy anymore. Dad picked me up by my collar. What did you say? I hugged the crystal case containing Mom as tight as I could. Daddy, Mommy's sleeping. Please don't wake her up. Leo, my stomach hurts. Tamsin clutched her belly and collapsed onto the floor. My baby. Our baby. Dad dropped me and rushed to her side, looking frantic. He carried her into the bedroom. A short while later, the family doctor arrived. The doctor said, there isn't much bleeding. Have you two been intimate in the last couple of days? Tamsin nodded, her face turning red. Everything else seems fine. Just avoid any physical intimacy for the rest of the pregnancy. After hearing the doctor's instructions, Dad asked suspiciously, she lost so much blood. Doesn't she need a transfusion? The doctor shook his head. No, she just needs some rest and iron-rich food. Dad scowled and yelled, you hack. She lost all that blood, and you say no transfusion? Are we paying you to sit around? My daughter is type B, just like Tamsin. Draw her blood and give it to Tamsin. Dad walked out and snatched the crystal case from my arms, throwing it aside. He dragged me to the doctor. Draw her blood now. Fix Tamsin up. The doctor looked at my fragile state and said hesitantly, the girl is so young, and she looks very unwell. She really isn't fit to give blood. Dad roared. I told you to do it. Stop talking and do your job. If you don't draw that blood, you're fired. Dad pinned me down, and the doctor's hands shook as he drew my blood. A needle as thick as my finger was pushed into my arm. The pain was so intense I nearly blacked out. When Mom was pregnant with me, my paternal grandmother hated that I was a girl and wanted Mom to get rid of me. Dad had knelt before Grandma and said, I don't care if Margot has a boy or a girl. I'll accept them both. Grandma was furious. What use is a girl? Carrying on the Sterling name is the only thing that matters. Dad had to fight her again. I don't care. I just want Margot and my baby to be safe. Now, that same father was hurting me for the sake of the son in the trainer's belly. After the transfusion, Tamsin let out a cry and fainted. Quick, draw another vial. Mr. Sterling, I really can't. Any more and Gabbie's life will be in danger. Dad glared at the doctor and tried to grab the syringe himself. The baby Tamsin is carrying is Gabbie's brother. Gabbie should be happy to help her brother. The doctor glanced at the unconscious Tamsin and said, if we continue the transfusion, it might actually harm the baby in Ms. Miller's womb. The moment those words left his mouth, Tamsin's eyes flew open. Leo, I'm okay now. Dad immediately let go of me and rushed to the bed, clutching Tamsin's hand. Leo, seeing those things in the villa makes my head and stomach hurt. Margot clearly set all that up because she doesn't want this baby to be born. She's trying to kill us. Dad squeezed her hand. Don't worry, Tamsin. I'm going to smash all that junk right now. Dad turned and grabbed a golf club from the corner. He headed straight for Mom's memorial. Leo, my stomach hurts. Tamsin clutched her belly and collapsed onto the floor. My baby. Our baby. Dad dropped me and rushed to her side, looking frantic. He carried her into the bedroom. A short while later, the family doctor arrived. The doctor said, there isn't much bleeding. Have you two been intimate in the last couple of days? Tamsin nodded, her face turning red. Everything else seems fine. Just avoid any physical intimacy for the rest of the pregnancy. After hearing the doctor's instructions, Dad asked suspiciously, she lost so much blood. Doesn't she need a transfusion? The doctor shook his head. No, she just needs some rest and iron-rich food. Dad scowled and yelled, you hack. She lost all that blood and you say no transfusion? Are we paying you to sit around? My daughter is type B just like Tamsin. Draw her blood and give it to Tamsin. Dad walked out and snatched the crystal case from my arms, throwing it aside. He dragged me to the doctor. Draw her blood now. Fix Tamsin up. The doctor looked at my fragile state and said hesitantly, the girl is so young, and she looks very unwell. She really isn't fit to give blood. Dad roared. I told you to do it. Stop talking and do your job. If you don't draw that blood, you're fired. Dad pinned me down, and the doctor's hands shook as he drew my blood. A needle as thick as my finger was pushed into my arm. The pain was so intense I nearly blacked out. When Mom was pregnant with me, my paternal grandmother hated that I was a girl and wanted Mom to get rid of me. Dad had knelt before Grandma and said, I don't care if Margot has a boy or a girl. I'll accept them both. Grandma was furious. What use is a girl? Carrying on the Sterling name is the only thing that matters. Dad had defied her again. I don't care. I just want Margot and my baby to be safe. Now, that same father was hurting me for the sake of the son in the trainer's belly. After the transfusion, Tamsin let out a cry and fainted. Quick! Draw another vial. Mr. Sterling, I really can't. Any more and Gabbie's life will be in danger. Dad glared at the doctor and tried to grab the syringe himself. The baby Tamsin is carrying is Gabbie's brother. Gabbie should be happy to help her brother. The doctor glanced at the unconscious Tamsin and said, if we continue the transfusion, it might actually harm the baby in Ms. Miller's womb. The moment those words left his mouth, Tamsin's eyes flew open. Leo, I'm okay now. Dad immediately let go of me and rushed to the bed, clutching Tamsin's hand. Leo, seeing those things in the villa makes my head and stomach hurt. Margot clearly set all that up because she doesn't want this baby to be born. She's trying to kill us. Dad squeezed her hand. Don't worry, Tamsin. I'm going to smash all that junk right now. Dad turned and grabbed a golf club from the corner. He headed straight for Mom's memorial. The sound of the golf club swinging through the air was a sharp, high-pitched whistle. I didn't have the strength to stand. The needle from the transfusion had left a dark purple bruise on my inner arm that throbbed with a dull, heavy heat, and my head felt light, as if it were filled with cold water. I could only crawl, my knees dragging across the wet plaster dust on the floor, trying to reach my pink crystal case. Crash. The heavy iron head of the club hit Mom's smiling picture first. The glass shattered into 1,000 tiny, glittering diamonds that rained down over the white mourning banners. Leo, stop. Graham's voice screamed from the entryway. The front doors of the villa had been pushed open so hard they bounced against the brass stops on the wall. Graham stood on the threshold, her face the color of old paper, her coat soaked with the heavy morning rain. Behind her stood Mrs. Higgins and 3 police officers in black uniforms, their leather duty belts creaking in the sudden silence. But Dad didn't stop. He was out of his mind with rage, his eyes bloodshot as he swung the club a second time. I'll smash it all, he roared. She wants to play dead? She wants to scare Tamsin? I'll show her what a real funeral looks like. The golf club came down directly onto my pink crystal case. The thick, decorated glass did not just crack, it exploded. The small, gray-painted wooden box that held Mom's ashes flew out of the broken pieces, hitting the mahogany wall of the foyer before splitting down the center seam. A cloud of fine, gray dust erupted into the air, settling slowly over the wet floorboards, over my torn clothes, and over Dad's expensive leather dress shoes. Mommy, I let out a low, dry whimper, my fingers reaching into the gray dust on the floor, trying to gather the small, soft grains back into my palms. But the dust was cold, mixing with the spilled water from the flower vases, turning into a dark, messy gray. Mr. Sterling, the lead police officer, a gray-haired sergeant named Miller, yelled, his hand already reaching for his holster as he stepped past Graham's. Drop the weapon. Now. Dad froze. The golf club was still raised over his shoulder, his breath coming in short, wheezing gasps. He looked at the police, then at the gray dust on his shoes, and finally at Graham's, who had collapsed onto her knees near the door, her hands clutching her chest as she let out a gut-wrenching scream of pure, raw grief. Margot. Graham sobbed, her fingers clawing at the wood of the floor. My baby, my precious girl, you monster. You killed her, and now you've scattered her bones. Graham's, I whispered, my hand reaching out toward her, but my vision began to spin. The loss of blood from the transfusion, and the heavy blows from the broken saddle finally caught up with me, and the room tilted, carrying me down into a dark, silent void. The hospital room in the pediatric ward was quietest at 4 a.m. The only sound was the low, electric hum of the heart monitor and the soft, rhythmic puff of the oxygen machine beside my bed. My arm was bandaged, the dark, purple bruise where the thick needle had entered looking like a dead leaf on my pale skin. Graham sat in the chair beside me, her head bowed, her face looking 90 years old under the yellow nightlight. Her hands were wrapped tightly around a warm paper cup of tea. Graham's, I said, my voice sounding thin and dry, like paper rubbing together. Graham's looked up, her eyes wet with tears. Gabbie, oh my sweet girl, you're awake. The doctors, they said your blood count is stable now. They had to give you 2 bags of fluids to replace what that monster took from you. Where is Daddy? I asked. In the county jail, Graham said, her voice dropping into a cold, hard register. And that trainer woman, Tamsin. The police found the security footage from the stable camera, Gabbie. Mrs. Higgins had set up a private surveillance system last month because she was worried about her horses. She took a sip of her tea, her hand shaking. The video, it showed everything. It showed your father tying the knots, yes. But after he left, the footage showed Tamsin walking into the stable. She didn't try to stop the horse, Gabbie. She unhitched the stallion's rope from the post, slapped his flank with her crop, and then she locked the stable doors while your mother was still screaming for help. I stared at the white ceiling. The ceiling didn't move. It didn't cry. It was just a clean, cold white. She locked the door, I whispered. Yes, Gram sobbed, her face burying in her hands. She wanted your mother dead, so she could take the house, the money, and the Sterling name. And your father. He was too blind, too obsessed with having a son, to see the snake he had brought into his bed. Grams, is Mommy still in the little box? I asked, my fingers clutching my blanket. No, sweetie, Gram said, gently stroking my hair. Mrs. Higgins and I, we gathered her. We put her in a beautiful, warm place in our family cemetery. She's resting now. She won't have any more nightmares. The corporate headquarters of Sterling Enterprises was located in the downtown financial district, a 60-story tower of blue glass and steel. Normally, Leo Sterling's name would have been printed in gold letters on the directory in the main lobby, but on Monday morning, those letters were being scraped off by a worker in a blue jumpsuit. Richard Vance, the senior attorney for my grandfather's estate, sat in the executive boardroom, his leather folder open on the long mahogany table. Mr. Sterling, Richard said, his voice flat but carrying the unyielding force of a hammer blow. Under the terms of the original partnership agreement, the Sterling Group's funding, the patents, and the land grants were all premarital assets of Margot Sterling, managed in trust by her parents. Since the defendant has been charged with second-degree murder and accessory to corporate fraud, the trust has officially revoked all licensing agreements with your firm. Leo stood near the window, his cuffs in the custody of two marshals. He wasn't wearing his designer suit. He wore a cheap off-the-rack gray coat, his face pale, his eyes wide and wild with a sudden, suffocating panic. Richard, please. Leo cried out, his voice cracking with a raw, desperate fear. I was blind. I didn't know Tamsin unhitched the horse. I was only trying to teach Margot a lesson. We're family, Richard. My grandfather worked with you. The partnership is over, Leo, Richard said, his eyes cold as well water. The bank has already filed the foreclosure notice for the villa. The accounts have been frozen. Your mistress, well, her faked pregnancy was examined by the prison doctor this morning. She was never pregnant, Leo. The medical records she showed you were forged using her sister's ID. Leo's face did not just go pale, it seemed to disintegrate. He stared at his hands, the fingers that had held the golf club, the fingers that had pinned me down on the table to draw my blood. He had sacrificed his wife, his daughter, and his career for a son who had never even existed. Take him out, Sergeant, Richard said, not looking at him as he closed his leather folder. We have to clear the building by noon. 20 years later, the coastal town of Mendocino was quiet in the winter. The air smelled of salt, pine needles, and the cold mist that rolled off the Pacific every morning. The only sound was the distant, rhythmic crash of the waves against the black cliffs of the harbor. I sat on the wooden deck of my small, gray-shingled cottage, a cup of hot chamomile tea in my hand. Beside me on the table lay a diploma from the University of California's veterinary school, printed in beautiful, clean black letters. Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, with high honors, Gabbie Sterling. I had kept my promise to Grams. I had never given up on my education. I had spent 20 years studying, learning how to heal the animals that had once been used to hurt my mother, turning my grief into a quiet, powerful science. Gabbie, a voice said from the doorway. It was Marcus, my senior research partner, a quiet, kind man with dark eyes who had worked beside me for 3 years to build our new regional animal rescue program. He carried a fresh batch of warm cinnamon rolls. The wind is picking up, Gabbie, Marcus smiled, sitting down beside me and pulling a wool blanket over our knees. Are you cold? I looked down at the diploma, then at the golden sunset over the ocean, and finally at his warm, genuine smile. No, I said, leaning my head against his shoulder, my fingers closing around the warm ceramic of my teacup. I'm very warm. Across the water, the first yellow lights of the harbor were starting to glow in the dark, but I didn't look at them. I closed my eyes, took a sip of my warm tea, and let the clean, cold wind off the water carry the last dry leaves of the past away into the endlessly beautiful horizon ahead.